Well, earlier this week, a documentary debuted on Netflix, and I had the opportunity to spend some time watching it, and it's incredibly compelling. It's called Sunday Best, and it's the story of Ed Sullivan and the Ed Sullivan Show and the role that the Ed Sullivan Show and the man himself played in allowing a larger voice for black artists and for artists that were not represented at that time in our country. And joining us now to tell us a little bit more about it, she is the producer of Sunday Best, but on top of that, she's one of our own. She's a Maryland person. She is an Annapolis resident, and she's the granddaughter of Ed Sullivan. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Margo Precht Speciale, who's with us this morning here on GCR. Margo, it's Glenn. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time for us.
Uh, Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I hope you're not hearing my dogs in the
Oh,
background.
no, and we wouldn't even mind if we were. We
Okay.
wouldn't mind that a little bit. Margo, a lot of times when I speak to a filmmaker, one of the first questions I ask is, where did your interest in the subject come from?
Oh,
I guess that part of the interview is a little bit self-explanatory.
yeah.
How
Yeah.
long was this something that you knew you wanted to do, and how did it come about that you were able to get this cast of characters together to make this a little bit more than just your own personal interest in telling the story?
Um, wow, that's a lot of questions. So my interest, obviously, it's part of my legacy. And I knew that, obviously my grandfather was famous, but most younger people, including people that I'm friends with, really knew him as, oh, he's the guy that introduced Elvis or the Beatles.
Beatles. Mm-hmm.
And after, and if you would look him up on the internet, it was just Ed Sullivan and the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
That was his story. And when I started to dig deeper and kind of had this yearning to learn more about who he was and how his career started and just because part of his story obviously is part of who I am. And um, I, you know, found out as I started to dig deeper that there was so much more to his story that's basically been, untapped and people didn't know about it. Um, and I felt a pull to make sure that people understood the full picture and not just the headline moments, but the quiet ones too.
I guess I asked that question. Did you know growing up, like, were you aware of how significant of a figure your grandfather was within the black community and how much reverence they had for him?
No, that's a great question. I had no clue at all. When I was younger, I kind of would shy away from being identified as Ed Sullivan's granddaughter because a lot of people would sometimes, they would want to, make fun of his onstage persona, do imitations of, how he spoke to me. And it was attention that I didn't want,
Mm-hmm.
really. So I just kind of pushed it aside. And it wasn't really until my mom passed away in 2004 that's where I felt this yearning to kind of learn more about my family history. And as I was, surfing the internet, I came across an article by a sociologist that was basically giving my grandfather that the credit, actually, which is a bit of an overstatement, I think, was he called him a civil rights trailblazer. And my grandfather was never a crusader in that sense. He did quiet things, he moved the needle in his own way. But yeah, it was eye-opening for me. It's something I became tremendously proud of because, social justice and civil rights has always been very important to me. And I started to explore it more. And when you asked about Annapolis, I was involved with the Annapolis Film Festival. And I learned, documentaries were a wonderful way to tell stories. And I met some very influential Black women there. And when I was introduced to them by somebody else as Ed Sullivan's granddaughter, they acted like I was the celebrity because my
Wow.
grandfather's show was so important in their homes when they were growing up. And, they were telling me all these wonderful stories. And it was just, it felt like it was, it was just the story just kind of came to be, between the research I was doing and the people I was talking to. I decided I really wanted to tell it.
Margo Precht Speciale is with us here on GCR. Again, Sunday Best is available now on Netflix. Margo, two particular stories from the doc that I wanted to talk about with you. One, ostensibly, we are a sports show, although, selfishly, this is the type of stuff that I like to do.
Yeah.
And it's ironic because a lot of this with your grandfather's story kind of starts with sports.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. My grandfather was a sports writer for many years before he even became a, television TV host. He loved sports. It was in his blood.
The idea that seeing injustice within sports kind of started to push him towards wanting to show more equality on television was something that I was utterly and completely unaware of, but I found to be, quite powerful that even at a young age, it rubbed him the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you're probably referring to the New York University
Mm-hmm.
story. That was something that I found in my research that he had um, basically written an article because he had learned that NYU was going to bench their colored, they say back then, that's, I'm
Right.
reading, thinking of headlines, obviously, their black player because because they were black and they didn't want the Georgia player to play against NYU. And my grandfather learned about that and was, completely disgusted by NYU's position and basically blasted him to the public. And in 1929, that was their internet, right? So that went out to a lot of people. And so he did have a long history in supporting Black athletes. He said that he played all sports and he played, with integrated teams. And he just always had a huge admiration for Black athletes.
Well, and powerful that when you said it was 1929. Right,
1929,
that's
yeah.
not an easy time in our history to be able to stand up and like that. It does take courage at that point to stand up and say something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to say something to that level, to, college football, he actually demanded that NYU disband their football team, I believe, and um, they had something to do with the Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably know that better than I do. So yeah, he called for the disbandment of, their authority on all of that.
It's incredible. It's an incredible story. Of all of the artists, and look, not really thinking a lot about this side of it. I'm very familiar with the history of the musicians, and everybody knows, do you bring up the Beatles? But the Harry Belafonte story to me, Margo, is incredibly powerful to watch. And Harry Belafonte, who became respected as one of the most important people of the century, beyond being a musician, beyond being an artist. It really the fact that he sat down with him and said, "I want to know. I want to know the entirety of your story." How
Hmm.
powerful was that part of it for you to hear from Harry Belafonte?
Oh, that was huge. That was our first interview that we did for the documentary. I think it dates back to like 2016,
Wow.
17, before he died, obviously. And his interview was tremendous. He, really had a wonderful relationship with my grandfather. They spoke a lot. They took each other's, guidance and advice on different acts that should be on the show. And yeah, that whole conversation, I think that's what it's all about, is listening to one another and hearing, you know, what everybody has to say,
Mm-hmm.
and just having these open conversations so you are able to learn about where people are coming from.
Boy, feels like a lesson that maybe can be a bit broader in this moment in our
Oh
history,
yeah. I
Margaret.
mean, the timing of all of this is just really eye-opening
I,
because, with everything going on with Colbert and, just our country in general, these lessons hopefully, you know, will open some people's eyes who watch the documentary and, learn, that sometimes you just need to do the right thing. You need to be fair and you need to be honest. And my grandfather opened doors for for people that were left out, and that's kind of the true, the bottom line of his legacy. That just to keep your doors open and your mind open.
or just listening, Margaret, to the point,
Yeah,
like just being
yeah,
willing to listen, and when you think you know everything, that again,
exactly.
just listen to someone else's story and
Yeah,
understand what they
yeah,
have to say.
yeah.
Any of the other like conversations that you had, I think about some of the things that Oprah said in the documentary that were so powerful.
Oh yeah.
But anything else that like a story that you weren't aware of that, as you were making the film, resonated most with you?
um that resonated the most with me. There were so many stories that we could have told that we just didn't have time to, unfortunately. Um, there was another wonderful story about my grandfather in the during the 1936 Olympics
Hmm.
and how he championed Jesse Owens. He wrote a beautiful, beautiful piece about Jesse Owens and the Olympics that unfortunately we didn't include. But I just feel like for my grandfather, everything that he did was so intentional. And it's something I didn't know about him at all. And it makes sense when you think about, my family and my life and, you know, where we've come, and the shoulders that we stood on. But, I think in general, there were, just more stories we could have put in there. So there wasn't anything, I guess also that my grandfather was such a great writer. That was another thing that really stood out to me. He really was a good observer. He observed things and he wrote about them, which all of the, narration comes directly from his writings. So in the documentary. So, you know, that was something that was eye-opening
That's
also
really
to me.
cool, and obviously sort of bring his voice to life,
Yeah.
with movie technique, right? Like,
Right, right,
um,
exactly.
but no, that
Yeah.
that was a really cool part of the documentary. And I would tell you, Margaret, the part that I didn't know, again, knowing a bit of the history, I was not aware that your grandfather handpicked every artist that appeared on the show. Like
Oh, oh,
we
yeah.
think of television, we think of like there being producers and talent bookers
Right.
and things
He
along
was
those.
the producer, right.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I wanted, people to understand about his role. he created the show. He was the producer of the show. Yes, he introduced the acts, but his primary role was producer.
It's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is truly a testament
Yeah.
to how and the relationships that he created, and hearing Barry Gordy talk about like his relationship with the Supremes. It's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a
It's
lot of his early relationships came from, when he was a reporter. And so in the documentary, we cover that he was a sports
yeah.
reporter, and then they wanted to, move him to be the gossip, entertainment reporter, which he was not happy about at all because of his love of sports. But he had to do it or he was going to get fired. But through that, he made incredible connections in New York City. And the original name of the show was Toast of the Town.
Yep.
And the reason it was called Toast of the Town is because the whole idea behind it is whoever was the best or the most talented, they were going to be shown that night on his show. They were the toast of the town. And later got changed to his name, the Ed Sullivan Show, which many people remember more, but that's what it was based on, the best talent. And that's all my grandfather cared about was talent. And he did not care, you know, about any color, because talent doesn't have color. Talent is talent.
It's incredible. It really is a wonderful watch, Margo, and I encourage everybody to check out Sunday Best, which is available now on Netflix. Margo, is there anything else that we can plug for you that you have? Are you on to another project at this point, or do you maybe sit and let this one breathe for a minute before
We're
you?
letting this breathe for a minute. But yeah, there's some other things in the works, but yeah, I'll let you know.
Margo, I'm really grateful that you shared this story with so many
Yeah, I
people,
appreciate the opportunity to share it, in my hometown,
and
and I
and
appreciate that. Thank
we're
you.
incredibly proud to call you one of our own, a true Marylander. Margo Precht Speciale, thank you so much for taking the time for us this morning. We really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thanks so much.